What kind of person calls the police over a child's tantrum, claiming your family's cabin as their own? Karen Mitchell did, her voice shrill through the phone as she stood on my porch, her son Tyler sulking behind her, his sneakers scuffing the dirt. The mountain air was crisp, the kind that bites your lungs, but the heat of her audacity burned hotter. Our cabin, a weathered sanctuary of pine and stone, had stood on this ridge for 3 generations, a quiet retreat where my family didn't just vacation. We operated. Not that Karen knew. She didn't know much about us at all, despite her years as our HOA's self-appointed queen. To her, we were just the weird folks who kept to ourselves, our trucks rolling in at odd hours, our lights burning late. She didn't know the half of it. The trouble started that morning, a Saturday in late September, when Tyler, all of 16 and puffed up with entitlement, banged on our door. I was in the kitchen, nursing a coffee, when his fists rattled the frame. "This place is ours now," he shouted, his voice cracking with adolescent bravado. I opened the door, squinting into the dawn, and there he was, red-faced, lanky, with a backpack slung over one shoulder like he was staking a claim. "Mom says your lease is up, and we're moving in." I almost laughed. Lease? This cabin wasn't some Airbnb. It was ours, built by my grandfather's hands, paid for in cash and blood. But Tyler wasn't alone. Karen loomed behind him, arms crossed, her blonde bob immaculate even in the wilderness. "You heard him," she said, her tone clipped. "We voted at the last HOA meeting. This property's been reassigned." Reassigned? I leaned against the doorframe, letting the absurdity sink in. The HOA had no jurisdiction here. This ridge wasn't part of their manicured gated community. It was federal land, and our family's presence was no accident. My father, my brother, and I weren't just recluses. We were contractors for a federal operation, a low-profile surveillance post monitoring activity in these mountains. Drug runners, poachers, the occasional lost hiker. We tracked them all from this cabin, wired with tech Karen couldn't dream of. But I didn't say that. Not yet. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice even, "you're mistaken. This is private property. Our property." Her eyes narrowed. That familiar HOA glare she used to bully neighbors into trimming hedges or painting mailboxes. "Don't play dumb, Sarah," she snapped. "Your family's been dodging dues for years. We checked the records. This land's under community oversight now." Tyler smirked, kicking a pebble like he'd already won. I could have corrected her then, could have flashed the federal badge tucked in my drawer, but something in her smugness made me pause. Let her dig her own grave, I thought. "You sure about that?" I asked, tilting my head. She huffed, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the sheriff. You'll be out by noon." The sheriff. Of course. Karen's go-to-move when her decrees didn't stick. I watched her dial, her manicured nails tapping the screen, and felt a flicker of amusement. She had no idea who she was poking. My brother, Ethan, was in the back room, already radioing our contact at the field office. By the time Karen's call connected, our side was moving. "Yes, Sheriff Daniels," she said, voice dripping with faux urgency. "I've got a squatter situation up on Ridge Road. The Cole family. They're refusing to vacate." Tyler shot me a triumphant look, but I just sipped my coffee, the ceramic mug warm against my palms. This was going to be interesting. The morning unfolded like a slow-burning fuse. Karen paced the porch, her phone glued to her ear, while Tyler sprawled on the steps, scrolling his phone like he was waiting for movers to arrive. I stayed calm, leaning against the railing, watching the pines sway in the breeze. Ethan emerged from the cabin, his tactical vest swapped for a flannel to avoid questions, and gave me a nod. "Field office is looped in," he murmured. "Sheriff's en route, but he's one of ours." I smirked. Sheriff Daniels knew exactly who we were. He'd been briefed years ago when our family set up this post. Karen's call was about to hit a brick wall. When Daniels' cruiser rolled up, dust swirling in its wake, Karen practically sprinted to meet him. "Thank God you're here," she exclaimed, gesturing at me like I was a stray dog. "These people are trespassing." Daniels, a grizzled man with a mustache like a wire brush, climbed out, his boots crunching on the gravel. He glanced at me, then Ethan, and I saw the faintest twitch of a smile. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "let's slow down. I'll need to see some paperwork." Karen faltered, her confidence cracking. "Paperwork? It's in the HOA records. We voted." Daniels raised an eyebrow, turning to me. "Sarah, you got anything to say?" I shrugged, playing it cool. "This is our land, Sheriff. Been in the family since '68. No HOA's got a say here." Karen's face reddened, but before she could argue, Tyler jumped up. "They're lying. Mom said they're nobodies." Daniel sighed, rubbing his temple. "Kid, you might want to sit this one out." He turned back to Karen. "Ma'am, this ridge is federal land. The Coles have a special permit. You got any documentation saying otherwise?" Karen froze, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Tyler's smirk vanished. I could have let it in there, but something in me wanted to push. "Karen," I said, stepping closer, "you really should have asked questions before picking a fight." Her eyes darted to Tyler, then back to me, and for the first time, I saw doubt. Not just doubt, fear. She didn't know what she'd stumbled into, but she was starting to sense it was bigger than her HOA clipboard. Daniels cleared his throat. "I'm going to need you folks to clear out," he said to Karen. "Unless you've got federal clearance, you're the ones trespassing." Karen sputtered, but Tyler grabbed her arm. "Mom, let's go." She yanked free, glaring at me. "This isn't over, Sarah." I smiled, letting her have the last word. She didn't know it yet, but she'd already lost. As their car peeled away, Ethan chuckled, clapping my shoulder. "She's in for surprise." I nodded, watching their taillights disappear down the ridge. Karen thought she'd called the cavalry, but she'd only stirred the hornet's nest. Our family wasn't just some backwoods clan. She'd crossed people who tracked threats for a living, and we weren't done with her yet. The sun dipped lower, painting the ridge in hues of amber and shadow, but the tension lingered like smoke. Karen and Tyler were gone, their car a distant rumble. Yet I knew this was only the opening act. Karen wasn't the type to slink away quietly. She'd be back, armed with more than just her phone and a superiority complex. I stepped inside the cabin, where Ethan was already at the console, screens flickering with data feeds from our surveillance grid. "She's got no clue what she started," he said, not looking up. His fingers danced across the keyboard, pulling up logs from the HOA's private server, which we'd had access to for years. Karen's vote was a sham, a power grab she'd pushed through with forged documents and bullied neighbors. But that wasn't the twist that made my stomach lurch. Ethan froze, his eyes narrowing at the screen. "Sarah, look at this." He pointed to a file buried in the HOA's records, time-stamped last week. It wasn't just Karen's name on the forged deed, it was Tyler's too. The kid had signed it, his scrawled signature unmistakable. "He's not just her lackey," Ethan said, his voice low. "He's in on it." I stared at the screen, the weight of it sinking in. Tyler, barely old enough to drive, was complicit in his mother's scheme. Not just a spoiled brat, a willing player in a plot to steal our land. The realization hit like a cold wind. This wasn't just Karen's arrogance. It was a calculated move, and Tyler was her pawn. I stepped outside, needing air. The ridge was quiet, save for the rustle of pines and the distant hoot of an owl. My mind raced. Why our cabin? Why now? We'd kept our operation under wraps for years, blending into the community as eccentric loners. But Karen's boldness suggested she knew something, or thought she did. Had she sniffed out our federal ties? Or was this just her greed, amplified by Tyler's teenage rebellion? Either way, they'd crossed a line, and I wasn't about to let it slide. By evening, our contact at the field office, Agent Marquez, called. "Sheriff filled me in," she said, her voice sharp through the secure line. "Karen Mitchell's been sniffing around restricted zones. Her IP's been pinging our decoy servers." My grip tightened on the phone. Decoy servers were bait for hackers or nosy locals who got too curious about our work. Karen wasn't just a nuisance. She was a liability. "What's the play?" I asked. Marquez paused. "Contain it. Quietly. If she's got wind of your op, we can't let it spread." I hung up, my pulse steady but my resolve hardening. Karen wanted to fight? She'd get one. The next morning, I drove into town, the cabin's isolation giving way to the HOA's pristine cul-de-sacs. Karen's house was impossible to miss. A McMansion with perfectly trimmed hedges and a neighborhood watch sign staked in the lawn. I parked across the street, watching her through the window as she barked into her phone. Tyler slouched in the driveway, tossing a basketball. I didn't approach. Not yet. I needed intel. Ethan had already tapped into their home Wi-Fi, pulling emails and texts. Most were mundane, but one thread caught my eye. Karen to an unknown contact, ranting about untapped value in our ridge. Prime for development, she'd written. The Coles are hiding something. I'll find it. My blood ran cold. She wasn't just after our cabin. She thought it was a gateway to something bigger. Land deals, maybe, or leverage against whatever she suspected we were doing. The twist deepened. Tyler's text to his friends bragged about taking down the weirdos and scoring big. The kid wasn't just following orders. He was reveling in it, drunk on the idea of power. I drove back to the cabin, my knuckles white on the wheel. This wasn't a simple HOA spat anymore. It was personal. Back at the cabin, Ethan and I mapped out our response. We couldn't just flash our badges and shut Karen down. That risked exposing our op. Instead, we play her game, let her think she was winning, then flip the board. Ethan hacked into the HOA's announcement system, scheduling an emergency meeting for tomorrow night. The agenda? Ridge Road property dispute. Karen would take the bait. She loved an audience. But we'd be ready, with evidence of her forged documents and a federal warrant waiting in the wings. As night fell, I sat on the porch, the stars sharp above the ridge. My father's old rifle rested against the railing, a reminder of the stakes. This cabin wasn't just home. It was our mission, our legacy. Karen and Tyler thought they could claim it with a phone call and a fake deed. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The HOA meeting room was a fluorescent-lit box, packed with neighbors perched on folding chairs, their whispers buzzing like static. Karen stood at the front, her posture rigid, a stack of papers clutched like a shield. Tyler slouched beside her, his hoodie pulled low, but his eyes glinted with defiance. I sat in the back, Ethan beside me, our faces neutral but our pulses racing. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that precedes a storm. Karen cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Thank you all for coming. Tonight, we addressed the Cole family's illegal occupation of Ridge Road. The crowd shifted, some nodding, others frowning. Karen had sway here. Years of browbeating had earned her that, but not everyone was sold. I caught Mrs. Larson's eye, a retiree who'd always liked my father. She gave a small nod, as if to say, "We're with you." Karen launched into her spiel, waving her forged deed like a flag. The Coles have no claim to that land. It's HOA property, and we voted to reallocate it for community use. Tyler smirked, feeding off her confidence. I leaned back, let her talk. The longer she spun her lies, the deeper her hole. Ethan's phone buzzed under the table. A text from Marquez. "Warrant's ready. Signal when you want us." I nodded slightly, my eyes on Karen. She was mid-sentence when I stood, my chair scraping the floor. The room went quiet. "Karen," I said, my voice calm but carrying, "you keep talking about votes and deeds, but where's the proof?" Her smile faltered, but she recovered fast. "It's right here." She slapped the papers on the podium. Signed and notarized. I stepped forward, holding up a USB drive. Funny thing about signatures. They're easy to fake, but digital trails? Not so much. The crowd murmured. Karen's eyes darted to Tyler, who shifted uncomfortably. I plugged the drive into the projector, Ethan's handiwork lighting up the screen. Emails, texts, and server logs showing Karen's forgery, her late-night searches for Ridge Road land value, and Tyler's boasts about scamming the Coles. The room erupted in gasps. Mrs. Larson stood, her voice shaking. "Karen, you told us this was legal." Karen's face drained of color, but she doubled down. "This is a setup. The Coles are criminals. They're hiding something up there." That was her mistake. Accusing us in front of witnesses, with no proof, was a step too far. I smiled, slow and deliberate. Hiding something? Like what, Karen? You've been poking around our land, making calls, forging documents. Sounds like you're the one with secrets. Tyler's bravado cracked. He tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "Mom, stop." But Karen was too far gone, her voice rising to a shriek. "You nobody, Sarah? You think you can scare me?" The room was chaos now, neighbors shouting, some at Karen, others at each other. Ethan leaned in, his voice low. "Time to end this." I nodded, giving the signal. The doors swung open, and Agent Marquez walked in, flanked by two feds in dark jackets. The crowd froze. Marquez held up a badge, her voice cutting through the noise. "Karen Mitchell, Tyler Mitchell, you're under investigation for fraud and trespassing on federal property." Karen's papers slipped from her hands, scattering across the floor. Tyler's face went white, his bravado gone. The twist hit me then, a gut punch I hadn't seen coming. As Marquez cuffed Karen, Tyler broke, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't mean it," he sobbed. "She made me sign it. She said we'd be rich." The room fell silent, all eyes on the boy who'd been so cocky hours ago. Karen's mask slipped, her eyes wide with betrayal. "Tyler, shut up," she hissed, but the damage was done. Her own son had turned, exposing her greed in front of everyone. I felt a pang of pity for him, caught in her web, but it didn't change the facts. They both crossed us. Marquez led them out, the crowd parting like a sea. Karen's protests echoed down the hall, but Tyler's sobs were louder, raw, and broken. I stayed behind, the neighbors' eyes on me, some apologetic, others wary. Mrs. Larson approached, her hand on my arm. "I'm sorry, Sarah. We didn't know." I nodded, my throat tight. This wasn't just about winning. It was about protecting what was ours. But Tyler's tears lingered in my mind, a reminder that even villains have their cracks. The fallout was swift and merciless. By morning, the HOA was in disarray, its boards scrambling to distance themselves from Karen's scheme. Her forged deed was the talk of the town, plastered across local news sites with headlines like "HOA President Caught in Land Grab Scandal." Tyler's confession had sealed her fate, and the feds were digging deeper, pulling bank records that showed Karen funneling HOA funds into a shady real estate venture. She planned to flip our ridge for millions, convinced it was prime for a luxury resort. She hadn't counted on our family's federal ties or Tyler's loose lips. I sat on the cabin porch, the air sharp with the scent of pine and frost. Ethan was inside, monitoring chatter on the dark web, making sure Karen's stunt hadn't tipped off the wrong people. Our operation was still secure, but the close call left a bitter taste. Karen's greed had nearly blown our cover, and Tyler's betrayal, however coerced, stung more than I expected. I'd seen him as a brat, not a kid manipulated by his mother's ambition. His tears at the meeting replayed in my mind, a crack in the narrative I'd built. Marquez called with an update. "Karen's lawyering up, but she's done," she said. "Tyler's cooperating. Kid scared, says she pushed him into it." I rubbed my temples, the weight of it pressing down. "What's next for him?" I asked. Marquez sighed. "Juvenile diversion, probably. He's young, and she's the mastermind. But he's not innocent." I nodded, staring at the ridge. Tyler wasn't innocent, but he wasn't Karen either. That distinction mattered, even if it didn't erase the damage. The town turned on Karen fast. Neighbors who'd once kissed her ring now shunned her, their mailboxes stuffed with resignation letters from the HOA. Her McMansion went up for sale, a for sale sign stabbed into the lawn like a middle finger. Tyler was sent to live with his father in another state, his social media accounts dark. I drove by their house one last time, the windows dark, the hedges already overgrown. It felt like justice, but hollow. Karen's empire had crumbled, but at what cost? A kid's future? A community's trust? Back at the cabin, Ethan and I tightened security. We upgraded our encryption, doubled our patrols, and briefed the field office on potential leaks. Karen's stunt had exposed a vulnerability. Our low profile relied on anonymity, and she'd nearly shattered it. We couldn't afford another slip. But as I walked the ridge at dusk, the stars emerging like pinpricks in the sky, I felt a shift. This wasn't just about protecting our op anymore. It was about reclaiming our peace, our right to exist without someone like Karen clawing at our lives. The final blow came quietly. Marquez sent a file, Karen's plea deal. She'd take a reduced sentence for fraud and trespassing, but her real estate dreams were dead. The feds had seized her accounts, and her name was poison. I read the file in the cabin's glow. Ethan across from me, his face unreadable. She got off easy, he said. I shrugged. Maybe, but she's lost everything that matters. Power, status, her son's loyalty gone. The ridge was ours again, but the victory felt fragile, like a truce with the world we'd worked so hard to keep at bay. I stepped outside, the night air cold against my skin. The cabin stood solid, its lights a beacon in the dark. We'd won, but the cost was etched in Tyler's tears, in the neighbors' wary glances, in the silence that followed Karen's fall. I leaned against the railing, my breath visible in the chill, and wondered if peace was ever truly ours to keep. Weeks passed, and the ridge settled into an uneasy calm. The cabin hummed with its usual rhythm. Ethan at the consoles, me running perimeter checks, the radio crackling with updates from the field office. But Karen's shadow lingered, a reminder of how close we'd come to exposure. I found myself scanning the horizon more often, half expecting another car to roll up, another voice to demand what wasn't theirs. The neighbors kept their distance, their HOA meetings now subdued, leaderless. Mrs. Larson dropped by once, bringing a pie and an apology. We should have stood up to her sooner, she said, her eyes heavy. I thanked her, but the pie sat untouched. Trust was harder to rebuild than a deed. One morning, a letter arrived, hand-delivered to our mailbox at the ridge's base. No stamp, just my name in shaky ink. I opened it, expecting another HOA notice, but it was from Tyler. Sarah, it read, I'm sorry. I didn't know what she was doing, not really. I just wanted to make her proud. The words were raw, scrawled in a hurry, like he'd written them before he could change his mind. I'm with my dad now. He says you're not bad people. I believe him. My throat tightened. I'd written Tyler off as a spoiled accomplice, but his words cracked that image. He was a kid, caught in a mother's schemes, trying to find his place. I showed the letter to Ethan, who read it in silence. What do you think? I asked. He folded it carefully, setting it on the table. He's trying, he said. Doesn't erase what he did, but it's something. I nodded, tucking the letter into a drawer. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Tyler's confession had broken Karen's plan, but it had also broken him, and that weight settled heavy on my chest. The field office called us in for a debrief, a rare trip to their Stark office in the city. Marquez met us in a conference room, her face all business. You handled it well, she said, sliding a report across the table. Karen's out of the picture, and her contacts are under watch. But we're pulling you off active surveillance for a month. Reset, reassess. I bristled, but Ethan nodded. Probably smart, he said. We've been running hot. I didn't argue. The cabin was our fortress, but even fortresses need repairs. Back home, I walked the ridge alone, the crunch of leaves underfoot a steady rhythm. The cabin loomed behind me, its weathered walls a testament to resilience. Karen had come for it, driven by greed, and Tyler had followed, driven by loyalty. They'd lost, but so had we, in a way, our anonymity, our quiet. Yet as I stood there, the wind carrying the scent of pine and earth, I felt a spark of something new. Not just survival, but defiance. We'd held our ground, not just for ourselves, but for the work we did, the lives we protected in these mountains. I thought of Tyler's letter, his shaky apology. Maybe he'd find his way, learn from the wreckage. Maybe we all could. The ridge was ours, not just by deed or permit, but by the sweat and secrets we'd poured into it. Karen's fall was a warning to others who might try, but it was also a reminder. Even the smallest crack can bring down an empire. We'd keep watch, as always, our lights burning late into the night. Winter crept onto the ridge, dusting the pines with snow and turning the air sharp enough to cut. The cabin felt smaller, its walls closing in as Ethan and I adjusted to our temporary downtime. No active ops, just maintenance, checking sensors, updating logs, and watching the feeds for any ripple from Karen's mess. The silence was heavy, broken only by the crackle of the fire or the occasional hum of a drone overhead, ours or the feds. I kept Tyler's letter in the drawer, rereading it when the quiet got too loud. His words were a loose thread, tugging at something I couldn't name. One evening, Ethan caught me staring at the drawer. "You're thinking about the kid," he said, not a question. I shrugged, poking the fire. He was in over his head. Doesn't make him innocent, but it makes him human. Ethan nodded, his eyes on the flames. Karen used him. Doesn't mean he's free of blame, but it complicates things. He paused, then added, "We've seen worse." He was right. Drug runners, smugglers, traitors, we tracked them all from this cabin. But none had hit as close as Karen. None had made us question our place here. A week later, Mrs. Larson called. "Sarah, there's a new HOA board," she said, her voice tentative. "They want to meet, clear the air." I hesitated. The HOA was a snake pit, even without Karen. But Ethan pushed me to go. "Show them we're not ghosts," he said. "Let them see who we are." So I went, alone, to another fluorescent-lit meeting. The new board was nervous, their smiles forced. They apologized for Karen, offered to review our status. I cut them off. "We're not part of your HOA. Never were. Let's keep it that way." They nodded, eager to move on. I left feeling lighter, like I'd drawn a line in the snow. But the ridge wasn't done with surprises. One morning, as I checked the perimeter cameras, a new feed popped up, an unauthorized signal from the valley below. Ethan traced it, a hidden camera planted near our mailbox. Not Karen's, she was under house arrest, but someone else's, someone watching us. My pulse quickened. Had our scheme tipped off a bigger player? We reported it to Marquez, who sent a tech team to sweep the area. They found 2 more devices, cheap but effective, linked to an offshore server. "Could be nothing," Marquez said. "Could be someone curious about your op." I didn't buy the nothing part. Someone was sniffing, and we were exposed. We doubled down, fortifying the cabin like a bunker. New encryption, motion sensors, even a decoy feed to throw off snoopers. Ethan took it in stride, but I felt the weight of it, the sense that our sanctuary was under siege. I thought of Tyler again, his letter a faint echo. Had he known more than he let on? Had Karen's greed pulled in someone bigger? I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task. We'd faced threats before. This was just another. As the snow thickened, I stood on the porch, the ridge stretching out like a frozen sea. The cabin's lights glowed behind me, a defiance against the dark. Karen was gone, Tyler was rebuilding, and we were still here, holding the line. But the new cameras were a warning. Our fight wasn't over. Someone else was out there, watching, waiting. We'd be ready. Spring broke over the ridge, melting the snow and waking the pines with a chorus of dripping water and birdsong. The cabin stood as it always had, weathered but unyielding, its secrets safe for now. The mystery cameras were a dead end. Marquez's team traced them to a defunct shell company. No leads, no names. We kept our guard up, but the rhythm of our work returned, steady as the seasons. Ethan joked that we'd earn a quiet year, but I didn't trust quiet anymore. Not after Karen. Not after Tyler's letter, still tucked in the drawer, a reminder that even the smallest players could shake your world. I started hiking the ridge daily, not just for patrols, but for clarity. The mountains had a way of stripping things bare, showing you what mattered. Our family's work, tracking threats, protecting this land, was more than a job. It was a promise, one we'd kept through storms and schemes. Karen had tested that promise, her greed a mirror to our resolve. She'd fallen, her empire of forged deeds and HOA votes reduced to nothing. But Tyler's apology lingered, a spark of redemption in the wreckage. I wondered where he was, if he'd found his footing with his father, if he'd learned to see past his mother's shadow. One afternoon, Mrs. Larson stopped by again, this time with a proposal. "The new HOA wants to plant a community garden," she said, her eyes bright. "Nothing big, just a patch down in the valley. We'd like your input." I almost laughed. Us, the recluses, invited to play nice? But her sincerity stopped me. "I'll think about it," I said, and meant it. Maybe it was time to step out of the shadows. Just a little, to show the world we weren't just ghosts on a ridge. As summer approached, Ethan and I got the green light to resume active ops. The cabin hummed again, screens alive with data, the radio crackling with purpose. Marquez sent a new assignment, a smuggling ring moving through the mountains. We dove in, the work grounding us, reminding us why we stayed. The ridge was our home, our mission, our fight. Karen's attack had shaken us, but it had also sharpened us, made us see the stakes in a new light. I stood on the porch one evening, the sky ablaze with sunset, and felt a quiet strength. We'd faced down a bully, exposed her lies, and protected what was ours. Tyler's letter had shown me something else. Even in the worst of us, there's a chance for better. We'd keep watching the ridge, not just for threats, but for those sparks of humanity, the ones that make the fight worthwhile. The cabin's lights burned bright, a beacon in the dusk, and I knew we'd hold this ground, no matter who came next.